Now, you think this power is timeless and something utterly perfect, but it's not. It's far from super. Hey folks, MasakoX here. Now, over the last 30 years or so, there has been something which has not only inspired the minds of millions across the planet, but it has also melded the evolution of anime in the decades that followed. Countless anime have either paid tribute to Dragon Ball's transformation, or even straight up made fun of it in its own way. Heck, even Dr. Slump's 1997 reincarnation did that, with Superman getting in some shape or form Super Saiyan. Even if the name wasn't used, they knew what was going on, the fans. There are very few Dragon Ball Z things more iconic than a Super Saiyan. Well, maybe fusion, but you know, it's debatable. This is something that has transcended the likes of the anime itself, Super Saiyan, and not a lot of shows can lay claim to that. Even if you don't know what the show is, other than what you've heard from other people, the idea of a character powering up, screaming their head off, and their hair turning golden is sort of baked into the back of your mind. That's a big deal, and very few properties share that distinction. This transformation has ascended way beyond being a simple plot device and become a part of global culture, spawning tons of references and jokes in the process. In some of our previous discussions and even our podcast episode with Nexus Mania on Dragon Ball in the Americas, we don't need to tell you how much of an impact the show has had and the powers that have actually been conjured up by it. But as much as we love it, as iconic as it is, when you are immersed in the Dragon world, it just doesn't have the same charm today as it used to. Is this down to fatigue? Is this down to nostalgia tainting our vision? Or are we just getting older and the oomph isn't what it once was? Now, cast your minds back for a moment. Remember when we first saw it, back in the days of Toonami, or whatever station you saw it on first was? Krillin had just fallen to the likes of Frieza, who had survived the Genki Dama, the technique that was destined to work perfectly against the most evil being in the galaxy, but it didn't work. Because of this, he had just taken out his frustration on Goku's friends. We then see that sudden shift in our protagonist's mood, which we will never forget. Gone is the Goku that you know, spoiling for a fight. He had had enough. Sure, Tambourine might have caused similar emotions to occur, but the way that the scene is presented to us shows more anger coming from our Goku than in the case of the original Dragon Ball. After what seems like an eternity of grief, we see the iconic golden glow. We witness the Saiyan dropping his happy-go-lucky routine, and the fight begins, and goes on and on and on and on. At the time though, that didn't matter. The sight of Super Saiyan was just too gosh darn incredible. While not the best fight in the history of anime as a whole, and at times it did drag on, the climactic encounter between Goku and Frieza surely is iconic and memorable amongst the fandom. In a way, the first battle in the show where ki attacks became the main mode of causing injury, as the evil tyrant slowly realizes that he had been outclassed in that fight from the very beginning. He thought he had control, but he wasn't even close. Goku had fulfilled the prophecy that defined the Saiyans for thousands of years and changed the show forever. The age of Super Saiyan had dawned and persisted. But for how long? Where did it start to decline? Well, it depends. Was it when we saw Trunks gaining the power, showing that the power wasn't exclusive to Goku and could in theory be attainable to all? Was it the time when we witnessed Vegeta attaining it without the need of a pure heart as we were led to believe? Only to then have his arm broken by Android 18? Not so long after the reveal. I mean, after all, him showing the knowledge was not only sudden, but also largely attained off screen. And yes, the reveal of it was spectacular and cathartic, but it was a shame for us to only see him getting it for the first time after the fact. Not to mention that we very quickly got opponents who very quickly were able to overpower something that felt like an ultimate transformation. Only within the likes of 10 or 20 episodes or so, it then doesn't act like that. So much for Super Saiyan. Still, we are figuring out when it lost its edge. Was it when Gohan maybe finally learned how to do it and replaced it with an even better version, making the first form of it redundant? Did it become too technical with the introduction of different grades of Super Saiyan? Technically, actually, Super Saiyan 2 was the 5th grade of Super Saiyan until Goku gave us the definitive name in the Buu saga. On one hand, you can make the point that the introduction of Super Saiyan 2's transformation was in fact the last straw for Super Saiyan 1. that it was the passing of the torch to the next iteration of the power, much like what Gohan was doing. Super Saiyan had served its purpose and was effectively retired. Super Saiyan 2 is better in every respect. It had arguably an even more dramatic introduction than Goku's first Super Saiyan transformation, and it has nicely crowned Gohan's arc. It offered more to the plot now that we knew what Super Saiyan was, but on the other hand, it had less mystique because we knew what it was. Was it the fact, perhaps, that Goten and Kid Trunks already had discovered it when we first met them for the first time as tweens? Not only that, but they were both able to do it purely on instinct, without having to go through the rigmarole of huge emotional distress like their parents did, mastering the form in no time. It blew Vegeta's mind when he realized this, and even though it could be seen as progress, it had far less narrative impact. It makes logical sense in a real-life setting, but for a story that's supposed to entertain, doesn't work so well. That had to be it, right? Possibly. Possibly not. Was it the appearance of Super Saiyan 3 that, while flawed in its own right, had set the original form even further behind, making it even more irrelevant? Or maybe Super Saiyan 4 in GT and Super's God forms? We could go on and on about this, but when we get to Super, the original Super Saiyan power exists only as a means to train casually. It's a toy, and to somewhat up the stakes in terms of scale of how strong somebody is. Simply put, you only matter if you push Goku or Vegeta to use it. Maybe Kaba's the reason for the idea of Super Saiyan losing its luster, when we first saw him getting it. For him, it was relatively easy during his encounter with Vegeta, when the latter just really shouted at him, calling him names and stuff. Was it maybe perhaps easy because of an innate facilitation due to evolution? Hard to say, but you can check out our video about what might make Universe 6 Saiyans different to Universe 7's crop for more. Perhaps the rub lies with Kaba teaching Caulifla and Kale the whole unfortunate tingly back thing. Granted, it's how he interprets the power, but to us, it makes the transformation somewhat trivial. Was Super Saiyan ruined by that? Or was it already a bargain sale? Well, you guys might be surprised which of those instances that we've mentioned was the cause for Super Saiyan's decline. It's not what you might expect. It is a scene that we agree is cool, really, really cool, with a character that the fandom generally likes. Something that surely left an impression on the fandom at large ever since it happened. But when you distance yourself from it, take your nostalgia goggles off for just a moment, you realize that Dragon Ball Z's history had instantly moved its power milestones, which had been there from the very beginning. Power levels from there on out became conjecture. Let's look at future Trunks, shall we? You probably heard us talking about this before in some of our other videos, but let's make a little thought experiment for today's video. We know how many of us hated the tingly back thing from Super, right? I personally don't mind it so much because it's how Kaba envisions it. If you got this power right now, you would try and describe it as much as you could, how you felt it. That's just what Kaba did, but I digress. Try to imagine that we all have from Dragon Ball is Dragon Ball plus Z, up to the conclusion of the Frieza saga. Now imagine that the Android saga as it is, maybe with a more modern take on animation, something that we would get today, with future Trunks' appearance being a prologue to that. We have this guy coming out of nowhere, who in his first outing transforms into the absolute pinnacle of power as we know it, and easily annihilates not only the improved version of the most powerful villain to date that we'd seen just a few episodes ago, but also his father, who's just as strong, if not stronger, with next to no effort shown. He was toying with them effectively. Not only that, but we learn that time travel is involved, and that he is a child of two characters that we already know, who at the time have nothing in common with one another. Wow, that's a lot to take in, clearly. Call it Toriyama subversion on our part, power levels being silly, or upping the stakes to the nth degree. But at the time of his debut, future Trunks makes you throw a lot of what the Frieza saga had established out of the window really quickly. You barely had time to register it and fully ingrain it in your mind before you forget it again. And what's really funny, until he's back in his own future timeline to beat the androids in Cell, future Trunks isn't really allowed to achieve that much when we see him the most. Yeah, he gets to hold back semi-perfect Cell for a while, and then have a fight as grade 3 Super Saiyan with perfect Cell, who turned out to be playing him the whole time. And yes, we have the history of Trunks special as well to work with, that shows his upbringing to be very traumatic, and we all love Trunks here, but he still doesn't do much other than observe and take stock and get into trouble. We didn't mind that at the time of its debut because when we were introduced to the concept, we were kids and teenagers, the intended audience for Dragon Ball. To us it looked awesome. Bing bam boom, sorted. Today, Future Trunks' debut is something so natural that we don't question it at all. And that's okay. This essay isn't here to cheapen the Android saga or Future Trunks or anything like that at all. It is to show us how many things from Z get a pass because they're classic, nostalgic. We're not trying to convince you that the tingly back motif is good writing and the absolute peak of Super Saiyan terminology. It isn't. It's intriguing from an outsider's perspective, but it's not epic in the slightest, which led to the fandom's disappointment. Super has tons of issues and sometimes needlessly complicates or oversimplifies things. But the thing is that nostalgia and distance from the initial introduction is a funny thing, and if sometimes it has been in our lives for so long, we are more likely to give it a pass. We forgive it somewhat for just being part of the show. It is what it is, as it were. However, the truth of the matter is that when we saw Future Trunks as a Super Saiyan, it was the last real time when the transformation itself upped the stakes directly, when it opened a new avenue of power. From there, it made us think, oh, that means others will get it then. It was just a matter of time. It was no longer exclusive to Goku. Vegeta, oh, it was assured. Gohan, everything in Z was pointing towards that moment. Goten and Kid Trunks, it'd be weird if they couldn't, and so on. At the very moment we were shown two Super Saiyans side by side, it was pretty much game over for it. We are not only shown this shot, but in a short amount of time, that power is also proven not to be enough to defeat the upcoming evil, the androids. Super Saiyan is no longer the ultimate conclusion, but becomes just a step on a much longer path. And sadly, the longer the path gets, the less impressive some of the steps become. Which is why I think some of us find the way Ultra Instinct was portrayed recently quite disappointing after its initial moments. There is no mistaking that the first time we see it, Goku being utterly mute was breathtaking. Originally it was framed as something uncontrollable. We felt as if it took over Goku's body and was out of his conscious reach, something he could never again attain knowingly. That's good, something unique to that saga alone to make it memorable. But the sole notion of him being able to now change it into it at will in the Moro arc and retain his personality even in the weaker form is really sad. I won't lie to you. Ultra Instinct has lost its mystery. The biggest problem Dragon Ball has is how quickly things stop mattering in the long run. Give it 20 episodes or so, and things easily reduce in hype, no matter what it is. And such is the nature of shonen, especially so fueled by merchandise as Dragon Ball. You need another action figure for Goku. If Dragon Ball were to truly evolve into a modern series, something has to be done about that. Super has adapted somewhat to modern taste, but the archetype of just having more transformations to sell toys is still ingrained in the 80s and 90s. You can't just switch hair color palettes and count on your audiences to always be excited every single time. You need to find new ways of reinventing old forms and keeping them relevant. Side grades instead of upgrades. Perils that can be solved only by one kind of form. Adding some quirks to existing ones that were not well known. Ultra Instinct could have been the beginning of a new journey, but for now, we're afraid that it truly might land in the same cookie-cutter basic basket as Super Saiyan 1 did. And as memorable the first transformation into both were, nowadays, it doesn't seem that it's there to last. In that sense, story progression killed Super Saiyan, and it's about to kill Ultra Instinct, whether we like it or not. So what do you guys think? Do you feel that Super Saiyan still has some life in it? Do you feel that side grades are better than upgrades, like with our sparking joy and divine mind powers? Leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going, and I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later!